Welcome to One Thought at a Time with Ian Travers, where we get curious about what makes us tick. We're here today with a man who's dedicated his life so far to a singular cause. Welcome,
Thank you.
Judd.
I'm glad you said so far.
I've still got to qualify that.
I've still got more to go. So that's great,
excellent. Well, this is great. I'm glad that we've got the chance to have the conversation. So let's kick off, Mark, by bringing us right to the present. So tell us what you do. What do you do now?
Well, I've recently taken a bit of a turn in my career path, but if I explain where I've come from, that probably explains to some degree what I'm doing now. So I've spent 35 years in the world of industry and human resource management. I've worked for organisations like Saint-Gobain, Toyota, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Rolls-Royce. And then for the last few years, post my time at Rolls-Royce, I've been working for a company called Workday, one of the largest and most advanced technologies in the world of finance and human resource management based in the cloud. I retired from Workday in the middle of last year after 4 years with them, principally to start running a portfolio of activities, which include working with organisations like ThinkingitBetter, but also I've recently been appointed as an honorary researcher at Lancaster University Business School, so I'll be doing some lecturing and research work with the university. And my wife and I have recently set up a scholarship to encourage young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to enter the world of nursing and medicine. So that portfolio is my sort of passion now, but principally my career has been in the world of human resource management.
And a couple of those things we're going to pick up and go back on. I particularly like to talk about the helping young people, which we'll come back to. But let's kick it off by how you ended up spending 35 years in the field of human resources. So what's the story of what got you to today?
Yeah, well, it started, I think, when I was looking around post A-levels for a career choice. And I'm talking about the 1980s, late 80s at that point. And I felt that there was something that I really was passionate about, which was basically the social engineering, the working of organisations, that kind of thing. And the most appropriate form of study at that time was psychology. So I did my degree in psychology and then followed on with a master's at Lancaster University Business School in behaviour and organisations. That then led to my first position working in the steel industry in the traditional world of personnel. And from there, I kind of gravitated towards personnel, human resources, human capital. Every organisation has its own nomenclature for that, but it also has changed a lot in the nature of what it's being. That led to many years in HR work, culminating in operational delivery for large organisations like PwC and Rolls-Royce. And so that resulted in me becoming the head of strategy for Europe for Workday in its formative stages in rolling its solution out to the market.
It's interesting, isn't it? If you look at that whole field, and you use the word there, you started in personnel, as that was often how it was called,
yes.
And now the world of Workday. What differences do you think you've observed over the last 3.5 decades in that?
Yeah, well,
it sounds like a while actually when you say 3.5 decades.
It is. I mean, I think I recently actually one of my friends from university asked for a bit of coaching advice, and I actually put him in touch with another friend who was somebody I met in the first year of work. And I said to them, the annoying thing is, guys, that collectively I've known you both for 70 years, and that's starting to show the age. But I feel young in mind. But to answer your question, I think the answer is that the differences are enormous, but there are certain things that have remained constant throughout that time. But if I focus on the differences to start with, I look back at those early stages. The terminology used then was, you mentioned personnel, but even when you dived under that layer, it was industrial relations, it was training, it was really payroll, pay, and those kinds of things, which in some semblance still exist in the world of work now, but the onus and the principles behind those have morphed into something much more than they were in those days. They were really a kind of mechanistic process of engaging a business with its workforce, but in many ways really kind of promoting, if you like, the divisions in culture between workforce and employees, particularly in manufacturing where I was operating. I saw that evolution change a lot, particularly I think in the early stages of moving from the steel industry into Toyota, which came to the UK back in the 90s and really set itself up to be a sort of a new model for automotive manufacturing, and that was very formative in many ways. But since then, I think we've seen the world of work change a lot, and that's been something that's been really changed to focus on skills, the sense of belonging, new kind of concepts around performance management. Those kind of things now are becoming the mainstay of many debates that the Office of the CHRO has.
Well, I know something that you and I have kicked around on many a car journey in the past as well is the role of people in the workplace as well, and I think, as you know, read around loads of stuff, and if you think right back to, let's go back to Dickensian Victorian, you'll attend work and you'll do as I say, or you'll lose your job. Contrast to today, where I think if workplaces still use that model, you will do as I say. You're lucky to have a job with us. People vote with their feet, don't they?
Well, they do, and retention is a major concern. But not only that, I think that very first phrase you used is in itself being challenged. This concept of the workplace. Now, I think it's easy, and I know a lot of conversations are taking place about distributed workforces, the work from home concepts, and so on. Now, clearly, when you're in manufacturing or the service industries, if you're in healthcare, the concept of workplace retains a lot of its similar features. There are differences, but because physically you are tied to a location, and that brings its own features and challenges in itself. But really, the concept of work in the broadest sense has radically changed. And the concept of being an employee, whilst there are many things that retain in between the social contract between employer and individual, there's a lot more flexibility and expectation now. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good, not necessarily for the employee. But businesses do need to think very differently now in their engagement, because there's a massive skills shortage generally for the opportunities that will exist in the next few years. And organisations cannot be complacent in assuming that they can always find the capability that they need. They're going to have to work really hard for it, and that means thinking very differently about the cultural aspects of their organisation.
This whole space about people, the leadership of people, human resources space, it's a differentiator, isn't it?
It is, but I think the great thing is, and this is one of the big differences, is that it used to be that kind of additional add-on that would be agenda item number 6 on the discussion in the boardroom. Now I think it's so central to leadership. It's not really just the auspices of the Office of the CHRO or personnel manager as it was in those days. It's a mainstay of any good people leader and CEO. They have to be thinking about the people agenda, because it's what drives success for their business. And I think that also goes further into this concept of employment. People have changed a lot as well. There's a lot more diversity in the market, and I think that kind of staid perspectives of the past have been inhibiting for many businesses. Now, those that are embracing a more broader perspective are taking the opportunity to drive success in their business, because they realise that consumers have changed. Their customers or clients may well have changed, and their expectation now that they as an organisation are reflecting that is very, very important.
So if I cast you back now, if I go back 35 years and think about, when you had the interest in the workings of the mind and psychology, and, the human resources personnel route was before you, did you feel there were any pressures to go down that route or not go down that route? What were your motivations at the time for going that way?
I think I wouldn't say it was pressure. I think the range of vocations were very different to what's on offer now for young people. And so in many respects, you kind of were channeled into a series of different established functions, engineering, or I mean, still exists in many respects, of course, today, but engineering, finance, personnel management. There was a sort of checklist. If you did one of those, as maybe you did, and I certainly did in those days, a sort of a careers office vocational test, it came back with a list of things you could be. I think my primary one was to be a hospital administrator, and I as you know, my wife works in the NHS. I'm sure I did a great service to the NHS by not becoming a hospital administrator. They've got much more capable people than me doing that. But it was very specific. So in a sense, not pressure as in from people, but the world of choice was more limited. But actually, I was grateful to be following a career path, because that sense of direction and certainty. And the first business I joined was a very established iron pipeline manufacturer. And their motto was, "We make pipes and we make old men." And the reason that they said that, despite its gender bias in that phrase, was because at that time, for 200 years, generations of the same family had worked in that business and expected to do. Of course, the business now has largely gone for technology reasons, because it's now plastics in that domain as well as competition. But that was the concept of the working environment I went into. You start a job and you stay there, and you get a defined benefit pension, and you leave. When you're 65, you get your clock and join the bowling club, and people lived and worked in the same environment.
Yeah.
It wasn't the same everywhere, of course, but in the industrial Midlands and where I was working and Yorkshire, that was the case. So that not necessarily for somebody going into personnel management. That was the expectation of the business, even amongst the management of the population.
So sometimes you hear the term, people say they had a calling. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think people do have a calling and almost a destiny of a path that they're going to follow?
I probably say that people have got an affinity, but these days I think and I come back to the first thing. You're right. In my kind of career opportunities, on your question about whether I had many choices, I don't think I had a huge array. I think there's a lot more choice now, because the world of work is much more diverse. People have got an affinity, but my general principle is to create opportunity. That would be my guidance now to myself, going back that time, is and I wouldn't say it was a calling necessarily, rather than an alignment to things where my skills, my personality type, my capabilities were most useful for the world of work that I'd gone into. Not saying that was perfect, because there were areas that I needed to develop or needed to put better people than me around me in order to be successful over the course of my career. But I think that throughout that, one of the things I realised is that at every stage you're at, one thing you can do is really invest in relationships and networking, forming good skill sets, so that when the next leap off point comes about, you're a lot more able to select from a number of choices in which path to follow next, and it actually creates an investment in yourself, so that the next choice that you can make means that you can make some decisions, and that may well lead you in paths that you didn't consider.
And when you're making those decisions, and again, it's an interesting one to reflect on, which I've done oftentimes, is to think about the decision. Did I make the decisions because it sounded like something that was really interesting and exciting to me to do, or was it because someone said you should do that?
No, it's definitely the first. I think there is something. I mean, I've made decisions not to do things in the past because I kind of thought, I'm just not excited enough about this.
Yeah.
But almost every time I look back over my career, I made the decisions I made because there was a draw to that. Sometimes it was the industry, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really exciting to go into automotive back in the 90s and be part of the Toyota environment. Very exciting to enter the world of aerospace. It's a bit like the Kennedy story of the guy that sweeps the foyer of the Space Center, saying, "What do you do here?" And he says, "Well, I'm putting a man on the moon."
Yeah.
I think in many respects, I like to think I was building cars. I was advancing professional services, I was making gas turbine engines. And I know you were much closer to that than I was, and you probably would hate the thought of me touching an airplane blade. But in the broadest sense,
yes,
for my sense of purpose, it was great. And having a sense of purpose, I think, is very important in getting out of bed in the morning.
I think that's a very interesting one, isn't it? And I was going to ask that question. If you almost have in my mind a picture of a set of tram lines, and the direction you're on, you're heading towards this where the tracks are going, or maybe it's more like a bowling alley, and you kind of bounce off the edges as you go, and those bounce points are those decisions. And I think if you stay with that passion in mind, that the calling, I think that's I think it's important to make those decisions based on what you believe and feel and what you think is going to excite you.
I like the word believe and the way that you've used that, because I think that it goes down to the core of yourself in many respects. I used to hate, I don't know about you, but I used to hate those questions at interview and say, what do you want to do in 5 years' time? What's your business plan? I always felt very nervous about meeting somebody that laid out a 5-year business plan. Apart from anything else, business itself may have had a plan, but there are so many variables you can't control. Yeah. I always felt that you've got to live to some extent. I go back to this concept of investing in yourself to build your capability portfolio. What's the right word? But it's almost, it's a bank account of skills, if you like. You build that up, you invest in it, you spend some, you keep some, and you make your decisions, because sometimes something's going to happen and you'll want to to press the send button and invest all of that in something new.
I think this thing about having a cause, I think it is really important. Whatever you do,
yes,
inside or outside of work, knowing the workings of the mind as well. If you go back to the word belief, if you have a belief that this is what you want to do, and you believe that you can, then you probably will. Yeah. Therefore, you need to understand what that is.
Yes.
But the thing that still interests me in this area as well is you go through and you think, actually, I believe I can do this, and I believe I'm good at this. But I think sometimes we sometimes have blind spots of the areas that we're really good at, but we don't realise we're good at.
Yes.
And it sometimes takes someone to say, hey, you're really good at that.
Yes. Well, we all like affirmation, don't we? And I think you're right. There are also, I think that's a great quality in some respect. Well, you want to know you're good at something, but not to the point of losing the humility that goes along with that.
Yeah.
Equally, I think the flip side of that is, you need people to tell you those things where others could do better, or you need to be different. And that's not easy. I'll be the first to admit, I'm not sure I was, throughout my entire career, receiving feedback was something that was ever comfortable. And those people that use the phrase, I'll take it on board, or, I'm always happy to receive constructive feedback. Inside, I don't believe anyone really feels terribly happy about that, even though they may learn from it.
Yeah.
But I would say that one thing I would say is it's important to draw inspiration from lots of different sources. I've been inspired by, I don't see it necessarily as the person that's more senior than me, although that can be the case. I've seen inspiration from, sometimes people who've got the most modest of ambitions, but they demonstrate certain qualities, and you think, wow, that's just brilliant. And and a lot of the young people who are, traditionally haven't been listened to are now the educators, particularly of people like us.
Yeah.
Because the world of technologies flipped the world of understanding on its head. So I look for inspiration from places that I haven't looked in the past when I was going through my career, because there's more knowledge and more capability in those domains.
So we could keep on talking and talking. I think this is. But there's a couple of things that I just want to sort of come back on a little bit, and that is, I guess I'm going to let's test this one out. So 35 years doing HR. If you were now going to dedicate another 35 years to something different, what might that be?
I think. As a vocation, though, with similar to yourself, having been a parent and seen the world of that's coming for our kids. I'd like to do something to protect that world for the generation coming through. Not that they need a lot of it, because they're very capable and well-informed generation, but we've still got our role to play, I think, to do as much as we can. So, the scholarship I mentioned earlier on is one of those.
Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so we were inspired by a couple of things, but, having had our children go to university, realised that, it is quite, even for families that are familiar with university, it's quite a big thing moving from the home environment to the university environment, both financially and emotionally. But we felt that actually, as level the playing field as it may be more than it used to be, it's still not that level, particularly in the world of medicine where my wife works. And we were very keen to provide a scholarship to help people from disadvantaged backgrounds, and also encourage more diversity into the world of nursing and medicine, and in creating more doctors. And so we established a scholarship, and we're now planning to see 5 students, that's 3 nurses and 2 doctors, through medical school every year for the next few years. So that'll increase every year, probably, for the next 5 years, for example, there'll be 25 students in total coming from those backgrounds, and providing them financial and mentoring support. So that's something we're really keen on. That, for me, is kind of a good thing. It's one of several things we're doing, but it's something we're really keen to do, because we feel that if we're going to take something from the society we've lived in, we should be willing to put something back. This seemed a good way to do it.
Brilliant, great stuff. And what we'll do, we'll put some details in the comments below if people want to find any more out about that as well.
That's lovely, thank you.
Mark, it's been brilliant. I'm sure we'll have many more conversations on our way on travels in the future as well. But for now, thanks really for joining us on this.
It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah,
it's been a real pleasure. And it's such a great thing to be part of Thinking It Better. It's a wonderful group of eclectic thinkers and talented people, and I'm really honoured to be part of this team.
Mark, that's been brilliant. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
So this has been One Thought at a Time with Ian Travers. If you want to find out any more about what we've been talking about today, or find out some of the other really interesting conversations we've been having, you can find us in the links below on all the usual places, and including Twitter and Instagram.